The CEO millionaire was dining alone, until he saw his ex-wife with triplets identical children. Before starting to watch this story, tell us in the comments section from which city you're watching this story. Let's enjoy this story. Ryan Mitchell sat alone at a small round table draped in crisp white linen at the River Cafe, the soft glow of the Manhattan skyline shimmering through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. The gentle lull of conversation and the distant rumble of traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge below created a soundtrack that normally soothed him, but tonight his appetite was lost somewhere between the perfectly seared scallops and the fine Chardonnay in his glass. He had flown in from San Francisco earlier that afternoon, fresh from closing a 9-figure funding round for his fintech startup, and yet the victory felt hollow. Success, he was discovering, did not fill the empty spaces left by loss. As he absently stirred the wine with his fork, his mind wandered back to the life he had left behind in California, the house in Palo Alto, the board meetings and product launches, and most painfully, the marriage he had sacrificed on the altar of ambition. When Emily Brooks had first met him at a conference in Silicon Valley 5 years ago, she had been an environmental lawyer with a quick laugh and an easy grace that made him feel calmer than he had ever been. They had fallen in love faster than either of them expected, marrying within a year and imagining a future in which they balanced career and family with effortless elegance. But little by little, late nights at the office became the norm, and Emily's gentle reminders that life was more than profit margins began to grate against the singular focus he believed was necessary to build his company. He had convinced himself that he was doing it all for their future, that the sacrifices he made at home were investments in a life they would share someday, only to realize too late that she had already moved on, and that the future he was building no longer included her. Their divorce had been cordial yet heartbreaking, a final acknowledgement that love could not survive on promises of someday, when today was already slipping away. He had not seen her since the settlement was signed 18 months ago, and he had not allowed himself to wonder what her life looked like without him in it. That was why, when the hostess motioned toward the entrance and he turned to thank her, he nearly dropped his wine glass in shock. There she was, Emily, looking as graceful as ever in a deep green dress that complemented her auburn hair, only now her posture had the confident ease of a woman who carried something more precious than ambition in her arms. And behind her, 3 little girls who could have been triplets in a perfectly choreographed dance. Matching golden curls tied with emerald ribbons, dresses of identical cut but in 3 shades of pastel, and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. They giggled in unison as Emily ushered them toward a table by the window. For a moment time slowed. The soft clink of silverware, the low murmur of other diners, even the distant hum of a tour boat passing under the bridge, all faded into a gentle hush as Ryan watched the 3 girls take their seats. They chattered excitedly about something, perhaps the lights of the city or the promise of dessert, and at that moment they looked like 3 halves of a single story, one that he had no part in. His heart tightened at the sight. He remembered Emily's dream of motherhood, how she had spoken of children as if they were living poems yet to be written. He remembered how he had told her he was not ready, that the company came first. He had been so sure that postponing parenthood was a small price to pay for eventual riches. Now he saw the cost in the innocent joy of those 3 faces. Ryan's pulse quickened as he wondered whether they were his children. He had never insisted on a paternity test, out of pride, guilt, or perhaps the fear of what it might mean if the results were ambiguous. He had asked Emily to keep his name out of the divorce decree, to protect his reputation and his privacy, and in return she had asked only that he stay away. He had agreed, burying the ache of separation under spreadsheets and pitch decks. But now, watching those identical triplets lean forward as Emily read aloud from a picture book, he felt as if the foundation of his carefully constructed world was trembling. He told himself he would not interfere. He was a stranger who had been shown kindness once, and perhaps it was his turn to remain unseen. Yet as he sipped the wine, he noticed how one of the girls paused and turned her head toward him, her gaze curious for a fleeting second before she returned to her sisters. He wondered if she recognized something familiar in his features, the same sharp jawline, the same hesitant smile. His breath caught when she whispered to her sister, and they all glanced in his direction, as if testing the air for traces of a story they had only begun to sense. Emily glanced up too, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she smiled politely and looked away. That small exchange, more powerful than any words, shattered his resolve. He pushed back his chair, the legs scraping softly on the polished wood floor, and walked toward their table, each step feeling both inevitable and terrifying. The hostess raised an eyebrow but said nothing as he approached. Emily closed the book and set it aside, the triplets leaning forward, their expressions a mix of excitement and uncertainty. He stopped just short of the table, swallowing hard to steady his voice. "Emily," he said, and the single word carried the weight of 5 years of absence. She looked at him fully then, the protective calm she wore as a shield flickering under the restaurant's warm lights. "Ryan," she replied, her tone careful. The girls watched him with wide eyes, and a flush rose to his cheeks as he realized how much time he had missed. Their growth, their voices, the way they sat with synchronized posture. He cleared his throat. I didn't expect to see you here." He gestured awkwardly to the empty chair across from them. "May I join you?" Emily exchanged a glance with the triplets, who whispered among themselves in soft, excited voices. Finally she nodded. "Just for a minute?" The girls beamed, scooting aside to make room. Ryan sat down, and for a moment the four of them regarded each other in silence, the hum of the restaurant filling the space between past regrets and uncertain futures. He looked at the girls' identical faces and felt a surge of protectiveness he had never known he was capable of. "I see you've brought them out for dinner," he said, forcing a lightness into his voice as he addressed Emily. "They look incredible." "They keep me on my toes," Emily replied with a small laugh. "I wanted to celebrate Lily's first day of kindergarten. And Emma's art project got selected for the school showcase, and Nora, well, she just wanted to wear her favorite dress." She looked at each girl by name, pride shining in her eyes. Ryan felt a pang of longing as he listened, realizing that every milestone he had missed was etched into Emily's gentle tone. He turned to the girls. "Congratulations on kindergarten, Lily. That's a big step." Lily nodded shyly, clutching a small stuffed rabbit. "And Emma, an art showcase, wow. You must be very talented." Emma grinned, revealing a gap where a tooth had fallen out. Nora bounced in her seat, eager to be noticed. Ryan addressed her last, and she beamed so brightly that he felt his chest tighten with affection. Emily watched him carefully as if weighing each word. "They've never met you," she said softly. "I wasn't sure it was the right time." Ryan's throat went dry. "I know I've been absent." He stopped himself, swallowing the enormity of the apology he owed her and the children. Instead he said, "I'd like to change that if you'll let me." Emily looked at the triplets, who whispered among themselves before Lily spoke up. "Baba?" she asked, using the word they had begun to call him in private moments. The other two repeated it in unison, their identical voices wrapping around his heart. Ryan felt tears prick his eyes. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yes," he said softly. "Baba." In that instant, the chasm of years seemed to narrow, bridged by the simple truth in 3 small voices. Around them, the restaurant continued its evening rhythm, but for Ryan Mitchell the world had shifted. He reached out tentatively to take each little hand, one after another, marveling at the warmth and softness he had missed. Emily watched him, her expression unreadable, and Ryan knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that trust would have to be earned, that he would have to prove himself not with words but with presence. But as he looked into the bright, hopeful eyes of Lily, Emma, and Nora, he felt something he had not felt in years, the promise of a future worth fighting for. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Jacob Foster woke before dawn, the soft hum of New York City barely stirring outside his Central Park West apartment. He lay still for a moment, listening to the distant rumble of a garbage truck winding down the avenue, and felt a familiar knot of anticipation in his stomach. Today was the day he would try to prove himself, not to investors or board members, but to 3 little girls whose trust he had only just begun to earn. He dressed quickly in a navy suit, pausing only to straighten his silk tie in the mirror and smooth back the dark hair that had begun to show a few premature silver strands at the temples. As he stepped into the hallway, he caught sight of his reflection in the polished brass door numbered 12B, and steeled himself. This was no ordinary business meeting. This was the first real chance to be the father he had missed being for Lily, Emma, and Nora. By 7:30 a.m., he was downstairs in the lobby, where the concierge greeted him with a knowing nod. "Big day, Mr. Foster?" she asked quietly. He offered a polite smile. "First day of kindergarten," he replied. The concierge's eyes softened. "They're lucky to have you here." Jacob thanked her and stepped into the elevator, rehearsing in his mind how he would greet the girls, what he would say to their teacher, and how he would handle the inevitable mixture of pride and nerves swirling within him. At Riverdale Elementary School, the morning light filtered through tall windows in the cheerful foyer, illuminating rows of cubbies painted in pastel hues. Parents milled about, snapping photos of their children clutching backpacks nearly as big as they were. Jacob's heart pounded when he spotted Lily, Emma, and Nora standing in a line, their tiny hands gripping the straps of rainbow-colored bags. They looked up and their faces brightened when they saw him. Lily, the quietest of the three, offered a small wave. Emma bounced on her toes, while Nora threw her arms around Jacob's leg in a spontaneous hug. He knelt down to return the embrace, careful to keep his suit clean, and whispered, "How are my girls this morning?" Their teacher, Miss Patel, an energetic woman with braided hair and wire-rimmed glasses, approached with a clipboard and a warm smile. "Mr. Foster, so glad you could join us," she said, extending her hand. "We're just about to line up for the classroom." Jacob shook her hand, his palms slightly clammy. "Thank you for having me. I wouldn't miss it." He glanced at the girls. "Ready for your big day?" Emma nodded vigorously. Lily hesitated, glancing at him with wide eyes, and Nora squeezed his hand as if seeking reassurance. Jacob knelt again. "You're going to do great. I'll be right here when school's out, okay?" The girls nodded in unison. As the class filed into room 3B, Jacob lingered in the hallway, watching through the doorway as they settled onto tiny chairs in a semicircle. He saw Lily's tentative posture as she traced the edge of her desk, Emma's excited chatter with a classmate about the color of crayons, and Nora's shy smile when Miss Patel read aloud the morning announcements. Jacob felt a swell of pride so intense it threatened to overwhelm him. He took a deep breath and stepped back into the corridor to greet the other parents, exchanging polite small talk about carpools and lunchboxes, all the while his mind drifting back to the three little faces inside. He spent the next 2 hours in a nearby cafe on West 79th Street, sipping black coffee and scrolling through photographs on his phone, snapshots from last night's dinner, the triplets' joyful laughter as he told a clumsy joke, Emily's tentative smile as she watched him interact with the girls. He reread her text, "Thank you for being here today. It means more than you know." His chest tightened at the memory. He typed a reply, "Always," then deleted it. Too simple. Too inadequate. Instead, he drafted a longer message expressing how proud he was of Emily for raising the girls so beautifully, then hesitated again. He wasn't sure if words could bridge the gap of months of silence. By noon, the school day ended, and a throng of parents gathered once more outside room 3B. Jacob pressed forward, scanning eager faces until he spotted the triplets rushing toward him, their backpacks bouncing. Lily threw her arms around his waist, Emma tugged at his hand, and Nora kissed his cheek. He laughed, lifting them one by one and spinning them around, the crisp spring air rushing in through the open windows. Miss Patel emerged to hand out art projects, the triplets' drawings of family. Jacob studied the paper, 3 stick figures under a bright sun and a rainbow. One figure wore a tie. "That must be me," he said softly. Emily had drawn the tie. On the way home, they stopped at a small park on the Hudson River. The girls chased pigeons while Jacob sank onto a bench, exhausted but elated. He pulled out his phone and left a voicemail for Emily. "I wanted to thank you, for yesterday, for today, for letting me be here. I know I have a lot to make up for, and I promise I'll prove I'm worthy. I love them. I hope we can talk soon." He hesitated, then hit send. He felt a mixture of relief and fear, relief at finally speaking his truth, fear of what her response might be. That evening, back at his apartment, Jacob arranged the girls' drawings on the coffee table, framing them in simple wooden frames he had bought that morning. He stood back and admired the trio of rainbows, each slightly different, a testament to their individuality despite their identical appearances. His phone buzzed. A message from Emily, "Thank you for being there today. The girls haven't stopped talking about Baba's surprise. Let's meet tomorrow morning at Café Lalo? 9 a.m. He allowed himself a small, genuine smile. "It's a start," he murmured. He looked around the apartment, the minimalist decor, the sleek furniture, the view of the river, and for the first time it felt incomplete. Without the laughter of Lily, Emma, and Nora, the space seemed hollow. He realized that success measured in boardroom victories and funding rounds paled in comparison to the triumph of simply being present. He thought of the journey ahead, the school recitals, the scraped knees to kiss better, the bedtime stories to read. A new kind of ambition blossomed within him, the ambition to be the father his daughters deserved. As he prepared for bed, Jacob paused by the window, gazing at the lights along the Hudson. The city that had once symbolized his solitary pursuit of success now felt like the backdrop to something richer, a family life he was only beginning to reclaim. He closed his eyes, envisioning the 3 small faces of Lily, Emma, and Nora, and felt a sense of purpose more profound than any boardroom strategy. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, questions from Emily, logistical puzzles, moments of doubt, but he was ready. For the first time in years, He slept with a heart unburdened by regret, buoyed by the promise of new beginnings. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The Saturday sun poured through the broad windows of Café Lalo on the Upper West Side as Julia Hayes slid into the booth across from Ryan Mitchell. The faded yellow walls, covered in vintage movie posters, lent the cozy cafe a nostalgic charm that contrasted sharply with the tension between them. Ryan folded and unfolded his hands on the table, fingers tapping out an anxious rhythm. Julia, his ex-wife, looked as composed as ever, her ash-blonde hair swept into a loose chignon, wisps softening the line of her jaw. She studied him over the rim of her latte, eyes calm but guarded. Between them lay 3 untouched plates of French toast and a silence weighted with unspoken questions. Ryan cleared his throat. "Thank you for meeting me." His voice sounded hollow in the midday buzz of clinking cups and hushed conversation. Julia inclined her head. "You wanted to talk about the girls?" she asked softly. The triplets, Lily, Emma, and Nora, were at home with their grandmother today, giving them space to speak frankly. Ryan nodded. "I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be there for them. Yesterday was just the start. I want to build something reliable, something they can count on." He paused, searching her face for a flicker of hope. Julia folded her arms. "Words are easy, Ryan. It's been months of absence. They asked for you at bedtime last night, 3 little voices saying, 'Baba, read us a story.' I had to tell them you were busy." Her tone was gentle but firm, the hurt still evident. Ryan's chest tightened. "I know, and I'm sorry. I realize now that busy isn't an excuse. I've rearranged my schedule. No more red-eye flights, no board meetings that conflict with school events. I want to be present every day." He slid a neatly printed calendar across the table, color-coded with Daddy-Daughter's Time, Story Hour, Science Fair, Dance Recitals. Julia glanced at it, eyebrows lifting. "This is detailed," she said. "I appreciate the effort, but life isn't a spreadsheet." Ryan's cheeks warmed. "I get that. But I need structure to keep myself accountable. I've also arranged with your mom to have the girls 2 afternoons a week and every other weekend. I want to co-parent, not just show up occasionally." Julia's lips curved in a small, wary smile. "That's a start." She sipped her latte, then set it down. "They're thriving. Lily's reading chapter books, Emma's in soccer, Nora's learning piano. They've adapted without you. I need to know you can handle the everyday things, the meltdowns over lost shoes, the school lunch permission slips, the scraped knees." Ryan nodded eagerly. "I've hired a part-time nanny and I've blocked notifications during their time, no work calls. I even talked to my assistant about routing emergencies only. I want to prove I can handle the details." Julia studied him, eyelashes flicking down. Proving is different from saying. Actions matter. She paused, then added, "I'll agree to the schedule, but I want you to start next week with drop-offs and pickups. No exceptions." Ryan swallowed. "Of course." They fell into a companionable silence as Ryan reached for a piece of French toast, breaking it in half and offering Julia a bite. She accepted it, the sweet cinnamon taste softening her expression. Outside, pedestrians strolled past, oblivious to the fragile negotiation inside. Ryan studied Julia's profile, her high cheekbones, the way her lips curved when she tasted something good. He remembered the early days of their marriage. Spontaneous road trips to Napa Valley, late-night stargazing on the Golden Gate Bridge, dreams of building a family together. He had chased IPOs and venture capital, leaving her to shoulder the weight of everyday life. Now he wondered if he could ever fully make amends. Julia set down her fork. "I don't want the girls to be disappointed again." Her voice wavered. "They already lost you once." Ryan's throat tightened. "I won't let that happen. I'll show up, rain or shine." He pulled from his pocket 3 small silver pendants, each engraved with an initial. L-E and N, Lily, Emma, Nora. "I had these made. For them." He spread them on the table. "A little reminder they're always with me." Julia's eyes glistened. She picked up the pendants, turning them over in her palm. "They'll love these." Over the next hour they mapped out logistics. School calendars, pediatrician appointments, family photos for the holiday card. Each detail they addressed felt like a brick laid in the foundation of a new partnership. The conversation shifted from tense to collaborative, and by the time they left Café Lalo, they walked side by side rather than across the table. Ryan hailed a cab and Julia climbed in first, then paused. She turned back. "Thank you for trying," she said quietly. "The girls deserve this." He nodded, heart swelling. "Thank you for giving me the chance." That afternoon, Ryan collected the girls from their grandmother's brownstone on East 87th Street. The triplets erupted into squeals of excitement when they saw him, each clutching her new pendant. Lily held hers up to the light, eyes wide. "It's perfect," she whispered. Emma hugged him fiercely. Nora kissed his cheek and whispered, "I love you, Baba." Ryan felt tears sting his eyes. He scooped them all into a gentle hug, inhaling the scent of their hair, strawberry shampoo and sunshine. They spent the rest of the day in Central Park, feeding ducks by the boathouse, flying a kite near the Great Lawn, and sharing ice cream cones by the Alice in Wonderland statue. At one point, Emma tripped on the pavement and scraped her knee. Without hesitation, Ryan knelt, pulled a tissue from his pocket and wiped the blood away. He kissed the wound, eliciting a giggle from Emma and admiring looks from passers-by. Julia's words echoed in his mind, "Actions matter." In that moment he felt the truth of it more deeply than ever. As twilight fell, they walked hand in hand toward the subway station. Lily chattered about her favorite part of the day, Nora sang a made-up song about ducks, Emma dozed against his shoulder, exhausted. Ryan glanced at them, their faces lit by the soft glow of the station lights, and felt a fierce protectiveness. This was the life he had missed, and the life he would fight for. He pressed the emergency brake handle gently to hold the doors open longer, letting them board together. As the train pulled away, he watched their reflections fade into the tunnel. That night, back in his apartment, Ryan placed the girls' pendants on his nightstand, next to a framed photo of the four of them at the River Cafe. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's moments, Julia's cautious hope, Lily's thoughtful grin, Emma's fearless laughter, Nora's whispered, "I love you." He thought of the challenges ahead, coordinating schedules, navigating school politics, balancing work and family, but for the first time those challenges felt surmountable. He reached for his phone and typed a message to Julia, "Thank you, for today, for trusting me. Sleep well." He hesitated, then hit send. As he drifted towards sleep, Ryan realized that rebuilding trust was not a single act but a series of small gestures. A scraped knee tended, a pendant given, a promise kept. The city outside his window was alive with possibilities, and he felt ready to embrace them all. Tomorrow would bring new tests, but he no longer feared them. He had found his purpose again, not in boardroom triumphs, but in the three small faces that dreamed of Baba's surprise. And with that he slept peacefully, heart full of hope. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The Saturday morning light filtered through the lace curtains of the small townhouse on East 92nd Street as Mark Davenport eased the front door closed behind him, juggling 3 pink and purple backpacks and a paper grocery bag. The smell of pancakes, blueberry, the girl's favorite, wafted from the kitchen, where Julia Hayes stood at the stove flipping golden discs with practiced ease. Lily, Emma, and Nora sat at the wooden breakfast table, legs swinging, chattering about the day's agenda. A class field trip to the American Museum of Natural History. Mark set down the groceries and crouched to greet them, planting a kiss on each cheek. "Good morning, my explorers," he said, voice warm. The triplets erupted into gleeful squeals. Lily held up a tiny notebook. "Baba, I made us an itinerary." Julia turned, smiling tiredly. "Thank you for shopping," she said, nodding toward the bags. "We've got waffles, fruit, and your favorite, orange juice." Mark unloaded the milk and eggs, then reached into the grocery bag and pulled out 3 small containers of glittery face paint. "Thought we could add a little adventure before the museum." Emma's eyes widened. Nora hopped up and down. Lily studied the paints thoughtfully, then nodded. "Dinosaur stripes," she declared. Mark opened the containers and gently painted green and brown stripes across their cheeks. The girls admired their transformations in the mirror, tiny jungle cats ready for exploration. Julia watched them, her expression softening. By 10 a.m., they piled into Mark's gray SUV and headed west on 96th Street. The city pulsed with weekend energy. Joggers along the reservoir, parents pushing strollers, sidewalk vendors selling pretzels and coffee. At the museum they joined the line snaking around the block. Mark lifted each girl so they could glimpse the enormous blue whale model suspended in the rotunda. "There she is," he whispered. The girls pressed their faces to the glass doors, marveling at the giant skeleton. Julia slipped her hand into Mark's as they guided the girls inside. They spent the next hour moving through the dinosaur halls. Lily sketched a velociraptor in her notebook, pausing to label each bone. Emma raced ahead to read every placard, peppering Mark with questions about herbivores and carnivores. Nora lingered by a display of amber-encased insects, marveling at the tiny mosquitoes trapped for millions of years. Mark and Julia watched them, coordinating who would answer which question, sharing smiles that spoke of renewed partnership. At one point, Emma tugged on Mark's sleeve. "Baba, do you think dinosaurs had triplets?" Mark laughed. "Maybe, though I'm pretty sure they were too busy chasing prey." Emma considered this solemnly and nodded. They regrouped at the Hall of Ocean Life, where the great blue whale loomed overhead. Mark lifted Nora onto a bench so she could touch the base of the skeleton. Lily and Emma knelt to examine a touch tank with live sea stars and sea urchins. Julia crouched beside them, gently guiding Lily's hand as she stroked a brittle star. Mark observed Julia's gentle instruction, the way she encouraged without overtaking, feeling a swell of gratitude for the mother his girls had in her. He realized how much he had missed, the quiet moments of teaching, the soft praise, the gentle corrections. After the museum, they walked through Central Park toward the Loeb boathouse, where Mark had arranged a surprise, a rowboat rental. The girls' laughter echoed across the water as they paddled, Julia guiding one oar while Mark managed the other. Lily steered, announcing herself captain. Emma kept lookout for turtles, pointing excitedly when one surfaced. Nora insisted on singing a song about ducks, her clear voice carrying over the ripples. Mark dipped his oar lightly, creating small waves that made the boat rock. Julia's hair caught the breeze and Mark caught her eye, feeling a spark, a reminder of the woman he had once fallen in love with. They docked near the Bethesda Terrace and wandered through the mall, where street musicians played violin duets. Emma dropped a coin into the open case, then tugged her father's sleeve. "Can we dance?" Mark lifted her into his arms, and she twirled as Julia and the other girls clapped. A small crowd gathered, smiling at the impromptu performance. Lily recorded a short video on her tiny digital camera, narrating in a serious reporter voice. Live from Central Park, Triplets dance with Baba. Nora demanded her turn, and soon all three were spinning in a circle, their laughter mingling with the music. As afternoon faded into early evening, they found a cozy spot on the great lawn for a picnic dinner Julia had packed. Turkey sandwiches, apple slices, cheese cubes. They ate on a large blanket, the girls sharing stories of their favorite exhibits. Lily declared the Velociraptor Hall epic. Emma insisted the touch tank was best ever, and Nora proclaimed the ducks super cute. Mark listened, heart full, savoring each detail. He realized that these ordinary moments, meals on a blanket, shared jokes, gentle teasing, were the threads that wove a family together. On the subway ride home, the girls dozed against Mark and Julia, exhausted from the day's excitement. Mark carried Nora in his arms, while Julia held Emma's hand and Lily rested her head on Julia's shoulder. Mark looked at Julia, her profile illuminated by the dim carriage lights, and felt a wave of tenderness. He gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. She looked up, and for a moment their eyes met in silent understanding. They were co-captains of this family journey, navigating uncharted waters together. That night, after tucking the triplets into bed in their shared nursery, 3 small beds lined with pastel quilts, Mark and Julia sat at the kitchen table, sipping chamomile tea. The day's adrenaline had worn off, leaving a comfortable fatigue. Julia sighed contentedly. "They're going to sleep with smiles tonight." Mark nodded. "We did good today." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you for trusting me to do this." Julia looked at their joined hands, then into his eyes. "Thank you for showing up." They spoke quietly of logistics for the week ahead, school play rehearsals, dentist appointments, piano lessons, mapping it out on a notepad. Each note was a promise to be present, to communicate, to share the load. The city outside thrummed with life, but inside that kitchen, there was a sense of calm purpose. Mark realized that partnership was not a destination but a practice, daily acts of support, compromise, and understanding. As they climbed the narrow stairs to the living room, Mark paused by the photo wall. Snapshots of the family's journey so far. First dinner at the River Cafe, the kindergarten drop-off, yesterday's pendants, today's museum adventure. Each image told a story of tentative steps toward reconnection. He added a new photo from the day, the triplets in the rowboat, faces alight with joy. Julia smiled as she recognized the moment. Mark turned off the lights and followed Julia to the sofa, where they sat close, shoulders touching. The quiet between them was comfortable now, filled with shared memories and unspoken hope. Mark thought of the challenges ahead, the unpredictable twists of co-parenting, the demands of his work, the delicate dance of rebuilding trust. But he no longer felt daunted. He had discovered that real success was measured not in deals closed or funding raised, but in scraped knees tended, shared laughter, and promises kept. As he drifted to sleep that night, Mark's last thought was of the three small faces peering up at him with trust and love. He whispered into the darkness, "We're in this together." And he meant it with every fiber of his being. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The Monday morning subway ride was unusually crowded as Olivia Grant balanced a latte in one hand and Lily's tiny backpack in the other, the rhythmic clack of the train wheels serving as a backdrop to three small voices chiming in unison. "Baba, tell us a story." Mark Davenport smiled down at the triplets, their faces pressed against the window glass, watching the city blur past. He ruffled Emma's curls and settled Lily on his knee, Nora between his feet. Olivia, his sister and occasional nanny, stood behind them, gently steadying Lily's backpack strap. As the train lurched into 72nd Street Station, Mark guided the girls off, the throng of commuters parting around them. On the sidewalk, the girls broke into a chorus of suggestions for the day's story: a pirate adventure, a time travel mystery, or a fairy tale about a brave kitten. Mark chuckled, hoisted each onto his hip in turn, and promised a new tale at breakfast. They reached the quaint brownstone on East 88th Street where Julia waited on the stoop, smartphone in hand, eyes bright with purpose. She greeted them with a warm smile, noting Lily's mismatched socks, a sure sign of early morning excitement, and Emma's crooked ponytail. Nora clutched a stray leaf she'd picked up on the platform. Julia kissed each child on the forehead. "Ready for school?" she asked. The girls nodded, their earlier energy focused into solemn determination. Julia glanced at Mark. "Thank you for the ride." He shrugged modestly. "Anything for them." Inside, over bowls of oatmeal topped with berries, Mark spun a yarn about Captain Redbeard's quest for the golden acorn, complete with perilous jungles and mischievous monkeys. The girls giggled and gasped at the right moments, their spoons half forgotten. Julia watched with soft amusement, stirring her tea. When the tale ended, Captain Redbeard safe at home, the triplets clapped and begged for just one more. Mark grinned and promised another chapter tomorrow. As they finished breakfast, Julia slipped Lily's lunchbox into her backpack, making sure the note Mark had written, "Have a great day. Love, Baba," was face up on top. Lily beamed. At the school door, Miss Patel greeted them again, her calm presence a reassurance. Mark knelt to adjust Lily's collar and whispered, "Be brave today." Lily nodded solemnly. Emma hugged him fiercely, and Nora placed a sticky hand on his cheek. As the girls scampered inside, Mark and Julia exchanged a look that spoke of both relief and an ache of letting go. They walked back toward the brownstone in companionable silence until Julia turned and slipped her hand into his. "Thank you," she said softly. "They'll talk about this morning for weeks." Mark squeezed her hand. "We're building memories." Back at his office near Columbus Circle, Mark found himself restless. He opened his laptop, but the blinking cursor on his inbox felt intrusive. Instead, he drafted a new story outline, this one for the girls, a citywide treasure hunt that he planned to stage for the weekend. He sketched clues hidden in places they knew: the carousel in Central Park, the steps of the New York Public Library, the statue of Alice in Wonderland. He emailed the plan to Olivia with instructions and a map. Then he booked a surprise, a private planetarium show at the Hayden for Friday night. As he clicked confirm, he felt a rush of excitement, not for a business deal but for the wonder in three small faces. That evening, Julia arrived at his apartment to collect the girls. She found Mark spread-eagled on the living room floor, scissors and colored paper everywhere, crafting handmade maps. The triplets darted around him, grabbing crayons to add X marks and doodles of stars. Julia laughed at the scene, Mark's suit jacket draped over a chair, tie discarded, sleeves rolled up. She joined in, drawing a compass rose and laughing when Emma insisted the north arrow be pink. For a moment, they worked side by side like old friends, the ease between them a quiet testament to how far they'd come. After the girls were tucked into bed by Olivia, Mark and Julia sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the treasure hunt clues. Julia tapped a pencil against her lip. "I love this," she said. "They're going to feel like real explorers." Mark nodded, sipping herbal tea. "I want them to know life can be magical." He studied Julia's face in the soft lamplight and felt gratitude for her partnership. She reached across and squeezed his hand. "You're doing more than you know." The next morning, Mark arrived at PS 87 with 3 hand-drawn envelopes. He slipped them into the girls' cubbies before class began. At lunch, Lily found hers, a parchment note reading, "Seek the horses that never run." She decoded it quickly, Central Park Carousel. Emma's clue sent her to the library steps. Nora's pointed to the Bethesda fountain. All afternoon the girls buzzed with excitement, sharing whispers and giggles. That evening Olivia led them on the hunt while Mark stayed in touch by phone, tracking their progress through photo updates. The girls standing triumphant by the carousel horses, kneeling on the library steps examining the map, splashing near the fountain's edge as twilight fell. When at last they converged on the final spot, a hidden alcove near the conservatory garden, Mark was waiting with a small wooden chest. The girls crowded around as he opened it to reveal glow-in-the-dark star stickers, chocolate coins, and 3 miniature telescopes. Their eyes shone brighter than the park lanterns. "For our next adventure," Mark said. Lily hugged him. Emma examined the telescope's lens. Nora pressed a star sticker to her forehead. Julia emerged from the shadows, smiling. She hugged Mark and the girls in a cluster that felt like home. The weekend passed in a blur of drawing constellations in the apartment hallway, testing the telescopes on the rooftop, and whispering thanks to Baba's best surprise ever. Mark watched the triplets fall asleep holding their treasures and felt a swell of fulfillment. He walked to the window looking out at the city lights, and realized that each small adventure was a brick in the home they were rebuilding together. Monday came again and with it the routines of school and work, but something had shifted. The girls now greeted their father's morning stories with eager anticipation. Julia trusted him implicitly with the planning and care. Mark carried a quiet confidence that came from knowing he was more than a visitor in their lives. He had become an active participant in the story of his family. That night as he prepared for bed, Mark found a note on his pillow in childish scrawl. "Thank you, Baba. We love you to the moon." He pressed it to his heart and whispered into the darkness, "I love you more." Outside, the city pulsed with possibility, but inside, Mark Davenport knew he had found his true north. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The Saturday air in Brooklyn's Prospect Park was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of early autumn leaves and roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor. Mark Davenport tightened his scarf as he guided Lily, Emma, and Nora toward the vast empty fields where their first-ever soccer scrimmage was to take place. Each girl wore a tiny jersey, Lily in forest green, Emma in deep maroon, Nora in bright gold, numbers stitched on the back. Mark's heart swelled as he thought of how far they'd come, from shy kindergartners clutching his hand to confident little athletes eager to race across the grass. He glanced at Julia, standing by the sideline with a steaming cup of coffee, her eyes bright with pride. She waved and Mark waved back, savoring the normalcy of a family Sunday. The girls ran onto the field, their ponytails bouncing, and joined their teammates in a ragged circle. The coach, a friendly man named Mr. Simmons, called out instructions. Passing drills, dribbling exercises, then a mini scrimmage. Mark knelt at the edge of the field, cheering as Lily intercepted the ball with surprising agility, Emma lofted a perfect pass to a teammate, and Nora toddled after the ball with fierce determination. He clapped so loudly that a few parents glanced his way, smiling at his obvious enthusiasm. Julia sidled up next to him, offering him her coffee. He accepted it gratefully, the warmth seeping through his gloves. After the practice, the girls collapsed in a heap of giggles and grass-stained knees. Mark helped brush off stray blades of grass and kissed each scrape better, eliciting theatrical sighs of relief from Lily and Emma, and a delighted squeal from Nora. They recounted every pass and goal, their words tumbling over one another in excitement. Mark listened, asking questions. Which drill was hardest? Who's your favorite teammate? And marveled at their growing confidence. Julia took photos, capturing Emma's triumphant grin and Lily's thoughtful analysis of strategy. Mark realized these were the moments he had missed before, and vowed to be present for every one of them. Later, they strolled toward the park's boathouse cafe for lunch. The triplets perched on stools, sharing a giant pretzel and cups of apple cider. Mark and Julia sat across, watching the girls dip soft pretzel bits into mustard, their faces sticky with crumbs. Julia leaned forward. "I've been thinking," she said, voice low. "The girls love soccer, but they also mentioned wanting to try painting. Maybe an art class next month?" Mark nodded. "Absolutely. And I was looking into that community theater's children's production of Alice in Wonderland. They could audition if they want." Julia smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. "They'd love that. Thank you for suggesting it." They finished lunch and wandered through the nearby rose garden. Lily stopped to study a cluster of pale pink blooms, and Mark crouched beside her, explaining the difference between hybrid teas and floribundas. Emma collected fallen petals in her palm, while Nora chased a fluttering butterfly, squealing when it landed on her jacket. Julia watched them, her expression soft. Mark slipped his arm around her waist, grateful for the partnership they'd forged. He realized that balancing work and family was still a challenge, but with Julia by his side, it felt manageable, shared. That afternoon, back at the brownstone, Olivia returned to relieve Julia so Mark could take the girls to his office for a bring your dad to work day. The triplets' eyes widened when they stepped into the sleek lobby of Davenport Innovations on West 57th Street. Mark lifted them into the glass elevator, and they pressed their hands against the walls, marveling at the numbers lighting up. In his corner office he showed them the city skyline, pointing out landmarks. The Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, the Hudson River. Lily asked about the computers. Emma wanted to know what a server was. Nora insisted on sitting in Mark's leather chair, swiveling until she nearly fell. Mark had arranged a special treat, a tour of the company's development lab. The girls donned miniature safety goggles and watched engineers demonstrate a prototype robot arm. Lily's eyes sparkled as she typed a simple command on a tablet. Emma giggled when the robot gently tapped her hand. Nora reached out to touch the smooth metal surface. Mark felt a surge of pride. These were the seeds of curiosity he had always wanted to plant. As they returned to his office, Lily hugged him. "Baba, can I be an engineer?" Emma declared she'd start her own tech company. Nora whispered into his ear, "I want to build robots with you." Mark laughed, hugging them close. "You can be anything you want." By late afternoon, Julia arrived at the office lobby to pick them up. The triplets raced down the hall, shouting, "Mama!" and launched themselves into her arms. Julia turned to Mark, her eyes gleaming. "They haven't stopped talking about it." He grinned. Mission accomplished. They walked outside together, the sun casting long shadows on the pavement, and Mark felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for this makeshift family, imperfect, loving, alive with possibility. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Mark and Julia prepared dinner together in the Brooklyn townhouse's kitchen. The aroma of roasted vegetables and garlic filled the air. They worked side by side, chopping and stirring, sharing the day's highlights. Lily's perfect penalty kick, Emma's question about servers, Nora's butterfly discovery. Julia paused, leaning against the counter. "I've seen a change in them," she said thoughtfully. "And in you." Mark wiped his hands on a towel. "I've changed." He stepped closer. "They're my priority now." Julia reached up and kissed him. "Thank you." They ate by the living room window, watching the city lights flicker on. Mark reflected on how different his life was from the relentless hustle he once knew. The deals and boardrooms still mattered, but they no longer defined him. His measure of success had shifted to scraped knees kissed, bedtime stories told, school performances attended. He squeezed Julia's hand, silently promising that he would never let ambition eclipse family again. Before turning in, Mark retrieved a small box from his desk drawer. 3 charm bracelets, each with a soccer ball, paintbrush and robot charm, symbols of the girls' passions. He clipped one onto each bedside table, a token to remind him of their dreams and his promise to nurture them. As he turned off the lights, he whispered into the quiet room, "Sleep well, my explorers." That night, Mark dreamt of 3 small figures running across an endless field, their laughter echoing under a sky full of stars. He chased after them, not to catch them but to keep pace, ready for whatever adventures tomorrow would bring. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Mark Davenport sat at his desk, the faint glow of his computer screen reflecting in his tired eyes. It had been an exhausting week, filled with deadlines, client calls, and the constant balancing act between his thriving career and his role as a father. As CEO of a growing tech company, there was always something pressing, something that needed immediate attention. But today there was no work on his mind, today was for family. He glanced at the clock, 5:45 p.m. Julia had texted him earlier, reminding him to leave the office on time. He smiled at the thought. His daughters, Lily, Emma and Nora, had been eagerly anticipating their weekend outing, a simple trip to the local park. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was the one time in the week when they could all be together, unplugged from the chaos of their lives. Mark turned off his computer, grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. As he stepped into the elevator, he took a deep breath, trying to shake off the weight of the day. He thought about how Julia had been his rock throughout the years, balancing her own career with the needs of their family. Despite the challenges, they had made it work. Until recently. The tension between them had been growing, subtle but undeniable. As he drove home, Mark's thoughts wandered to the last few months. The company had been expanding rapidly, and with that expansion came more pressure. He had taken on more responsibilities and in the process had neglected the very people who mattered most. Julia had noticed it, of course. She'd been patient, understanding, but there were only so many times she could accept his excuses before it started to affect their relationship. When Mark arrived home, he was greeted by the sound of laughter coming from the living room. He could hear Lily's animated voice as she tried to explain something to Emma, while Nora giggled in the background. The warmth in his chest spread as he stepped inside, the scent of dinner wafting through the air. Julia was in the kitchen, busy preparing their evening meal. Her presence was a comforting constant, even when the world outside felt like it was spinning out of control. After dinner, the family sat together, chatting about the day and making plans for the weekend. Mark listened intently to the girls as they recounted their adventures at school, their faces lighting up with excitement. For the first time in weeks, he felt truly present. He realized that, despite all the success he had achieved in his career, it was moments like these that made everything worthwhile. That night, after tucking the girls into bed, Mark sat down with Julia. The conversation was different this time. There was no tension, no unspoken words hanging between them. They talked honestly about the challenges they had faced and how they could move forward together. Mark promised to make more time for her, for the family. It wasn't going to be easy, but he knew that if he didn't prioritize them, he might lose what mattered most. As they lay in bed that night, Mark felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He had everything he needed: a successful career, a loving wife, and 3 beautiful daughters who adored him. And for the first time in a long while, he was content, knowing that no amount of work or money could ever replace the love and connection he had with his family. If you've liked this story, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends.